Welcome to the farm and to another episode of So You've Married a Farmer, Now What? Today's episode is with Natalie. Natalie is a pharmacist and cattle rancher from Nebraska in the US, and we talk all things beef cattle. Natalie is also the host of Discover Ag on podcast. You may have heard her talking about news articles in reference to agricultural industries. So let's jump into today's episode. Today, Inland Petroleum is sponsoring a small section of today's interview. Inland Petroleum for farming. Whether you are sowing, irrigating, spraying, and harvesting, Inland Petroleum has all you need to keep your machinery up and running. They can arrange direct delivery of bulk fuel to your farm. They can supply lubricants and fuel equipment for on-property use. Inland Petroleum employs locals to run locally operated businesses to make sure that the finances are going back into your farming community to continue benefiting you and your farm. There is no delivery too small or too large that Inland Petroleum cannot handle. Now back to today's episode. Well, Natalie, thank you for joining us here on the farm today for our podcast series, So You've Married a Farmer, Now What? Can you please start by introducing yourself, your family, and your farm?
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me. It's always fun to have conversations that take us, abroad, further than beyond where we normally live. So I am coming to you guys from the United States, particularly the state of Nebraska, which if you're somewhat familiar with their territory, that is right smack dab almost in the middle of the United States. So I'm kind of in the Midwest area. I grew up in agriculture. I grew up on a cattle ranch in actually Montana, which is going to be up further north. And I actually got my degree outside of ag. And so when I graduated, I didn't have, I guess really any intention at all coming back to our family operation. I got my degree in pharmacy and I was living close to our family ranch, but not on it. And so that all changed when I met and married my husband. And it kind of what we're going to talk about today brought me back to a farm, a ranch. And so that was 6 years ago now. And it's kind of been fast and furious with social media and just growing our own personal operation and our family.
Beautiful. So tell me about your family.
Yeah, so we have 3 boys, my husband and I. We have a teenager, a 5-year-old, and a toddler, a 3-year-old. And so we're kind of in the depths of all different stages of parenting, which makes it very interesting, but very fortunate, as many people who are in agriculture can relate to raise our boys on the ranch. And so I am home for a majority of the time with them. And so it's really a blessing to be able to raise the boys in the environment that we do.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about your ranching setup now, from, when you first moved in there to where it is now.
We have I'd say the heart of our operation is a cow-calf operation, which is that a term you guys, okay, perfect. And so my husband started that when he came back from graduate school. He graduated in 2000 and was it 9 maybe? And so quite a while ago, 10, 15 years. And we're recently starting a registered herd as well, a Black Angus herd. And then we're pretty diversified. We lease a lot of our farm ground out. And so that leaves us time to do different things within, I'd say like the cattle, the beef sector portion of the industry. And so we also have an AI business that my husband runs. We're pretty busy during May and June. And then we do some backgrounding and some heifer development as well too. So a lot of cattle and very little farming.
That sounds excellent. And tell me a little bit more about the development of your Black Angus stud.
Yeah, so we started that, this is going to be our first year that we're having a live auction on our ranch. Let's see, the 2 years before that, we did bidding online. And then before that, I think we had 2 or 3 years of private treaty. So this is probably our 6th year building our register herd out. As I mentioned, it's Black Angus. My husband has always been really interested in genetics. If you follow along with my social channel, you'll know that he is kind of the cow enthusiast in our relationship, and he is the real love for this lifestyle. And honestly, the cattle with it. I enjoy living in the country and I enjoy being a part of agriculture, but I don't think I can say I love cattle as much as my husband does. And so he has always been just, infatuated with cattle and more so the genetic side. So when he came back and built out that, cow calf operation and kind of the backgrounding and a few of the other things, he always had that big goal of wanting to do genetics. It just, it takes capital and it takes time. And so we finally got to that place. There is quite a funny story. We put in our first, I think it was like close to 80 embryos. And my husband actually didn't know how we were going to pay for it. And we went on a baby moon with my middle child. And he ended up, our last night, we went down to Arizona we spent time around like the Grand Canyon and kind of did some different things. And our last night, he asked if we could stay in a casino before we flew out the next morning. And I said, yeah, sure, that's fine. And long story short, he ended up having a very hot hand and winning quite an extensive amount of money. And that is how we paid for our first 80 embryos for our registered herd. And so it's kind of a funny story because if you're in agriculture, you know that a lot of just, blood, sweat, tears, and beyond go into building what we build, especially, as a first generation operation, or if you're a multi-generation that is trying to expand or grow or do something different. It's really intense. It's really hard. And so I just think it's so funny that, the cornerstone of our operation is, we got to where we are right now with the lucky, hand of blackjack, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So Natalie, tell me about, firstly, how you met your husband, and then tell me about what it was like moving to the ranch for the first time.
Yeah, so we met at my family's annual bull sale. So I grew up on a registered operation in, as I mentioned, Montana. We raised a registered Hereford. And so he was actually up looking at cattle. And we met at the sale. We have a post party kind of as well. And so we kind of met and we talked, and he thought he would just look me up online. And I actually didn't have Facebook or anything, so he couldn't find me. So it took a whole nother year for him to come back to another sale. And then finally that year he asked for my number. And so it's kind of funny because there's a running joke that he came for a bull and left with a wife. And that is how, me and my husband met. But we dated long distance. And then when I moved down here, like I said, I was living in, a bigger city in Montana. I was always very close with my family and our family operation, but I wasn't living on the ranch and my income wasn't derived from agriculture. And I really never expected to kind of be as involved, obviously, as I am now. And so when I moved to Nebraska and we got married, it was quite a different change for me. I obviously had background and familiarity with growing up on a ranch and, just being raised in that environment. So on that hand, it wasn't different. But it was different from the sense, like I said, I was, living in a city and I was practicing pharmacy full time. And I guess so much of it felt like home and so much of it felt just really different and new to me as well.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's very different as well, going from just living on an operation to actually being involved in the decision making and the business side of it.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually was asked the other day on Instagram, one of my favorite memories, and instantly what came to mind for me was our family bull sale. I have the most fondest memories, of growing up with the bull sale, and just having family and industry friends, come in the night before and kind of having like a get together and a party. And I can remember, being at my grandparents who had hosted, and it was so wonderful. I just remember being infatuated with the day, the bull sale would arrive. And now that I'm adult and, owning the ranch, it's a whole different meaning. The bull sale day is honestly one of our most stressful days. And it's the day that you kind of just want to come, go well, and go quickly. And so, yeah, it is really different. I think being raised on an operation and then, transitioning into that era or that time period where you are, whether you're sole owner or, your decision maker, whatever that is, it is a little bit different. And especially if you're a multi-generation, it can probably be a little bit stressful taking on that burden that, not burden, that's not the right word, but just carrying that load, I think, that comes with making sure that something doesn't happen on your generation's watch, making sure you continue it, improve it. It can be rather stressful.
Yes, it can be. I completely understand. We have our own on-property bull sale as well, so definitely understand a background of where you're coming from there. Mm-hmm. And so when you first moved in, was there any challenges or hurdles that you came across where you thought, oh, I wasn't expecting that?
Yeah, I think, again, it's such a different perspective being the child on the operation. I don't really remember my parents. I guess I should say it this way. I remember my dad being home for dinner at a set time all the time. So I didn't really realize, I think, this time warp that can happen on farms and ranches where, depending on how the day goes or what happens, there's not much like rigidity and schedule. It's if the cows are out or something goes wrong, you still need to accomplish the job and finish, feeding or whatever it is. And so I think that was a really big shock for me, as I kind of expected, again, coming from working, a 9 to 5, I had a schedule to my life. And so when I moved here, it was like, well, dinner's at 5:30 or 6 or whatever it is, or, we leave to go to church at this time, or we're going, to meet friends at this time. And I think for a long time, I struggled, probably more than I should have, with letting go of that schedule and the structure. Now, after 6, 7 years of marriage, I am much more fluid in kind of having, I guess, no expectations around a timeline. And I think that has really helped our marriage, and just the operation kind of run smoothly, I guess, is just being more open to eating whenever, or leaving whenever, or making plans kind of more last minute or on the go, so that my husband doesn't have the stress of trying to do everything out on the ranch and then also, keep a structure inside the house as well.
Yeah. And do you think that started with a mindset change or around changing habits?
Yeah, I think it was probably my husband, honestly. He has much more patience than I do. I would say his energy is a lot, just less than mine. If we were to put ourselves on an energy spectrum, I would be much more, high strung, fast paced than him. And so I think just being around him, and then also realizing that that was kind of the problem, it made me just kind of say, okay, well, it's going to be fine if dinner is later, or it's going to be fine if we have to do church Sunday and not Saturday, or whatever it is. And so I don't know if it was an intentional mind shift as much as it was just, maybe like matching my husband's energy a little bit more, and kind of meeting him, where he was at, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. When you look out over the ranch now, what do you think has been your biggest accomplishment together?
Yeah, I would probably say our registered herd, just knowing how much that means to my husband to start and grow that. And I think that's something that can hopefully offer true generational longevity, I guess. We do have, as I mentioned, 3 boys, and I highly doubt all 3 will want to come back to the operation. Maybe, 100%. That's pretty lofty. But we have a lot of conversations that, by chance, if all 3 did, we want to make sure we are setting ourselves up to have that be remotely possible. And so I think our registered herd and what we're growing with that is something that can really lend a hand at that. And it's not easy. We've had to do a lot of big investments into some really big genetics, and we've had to take some risks, both with, financial risk, and then just also, I think, learning to trust yourself and the decisions you're making. And so it's been, I guess, really rewarding to grow that out with him. And I think what's most exciting is that we're kind of still at the beginning of it. Like I said, we're just hosting our first in-person sale. We purchased kind of a bigger sire that we're, pretty excited about. So moving forward, I think we have a lot of things coming that is just exciting. And to get to do it alongside him makes it that much better.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you've mentioned that you have your 3 boys on farm with you. So can you tell me a little bit about the changes that you've had to do to accommodate having the boys on farm with you? Was it more of a setup and logistical change so that they were able to farm alongside you, or is it more we had to take a step back, and that's where your influencer and podcast, background took over?
Yeah, so a couple years ago, or at least for the first, maybe 3 years of our marriage, I actually worked off the ranch part-time at our local hospital as a pharmacist. And that worked for a while. It worked until it didn't work, which is, how most things go. But there came a point, as you mentioned, when I was growing, what we were doing online, that I couldn't manage the ranch, my job as a pharmacist, and then what I was building online. And so when I kind of looked at the three different things I had growing, three different areas, I guess my hands were in, I knew that I wanted to be on the ranch with the littles. And I knew that I was kind of just on the verge of doing some bigger things online. And so what kind of was shelved at the time was my pharmacy job. And so I think that change was probably the biggest change to afford us the ability to raise our boys in the way we are, with me being on the ranch full time now and getting, having them accompany Luke and I. I say that lightly because I'm not officially like an employee of the ranch or anything. So I don't have to go out every day. It doesn't depend on me, a job for me to go out, and so I kind of have the luxury of going outside and helping or taking along when I want to, and staying inside with the littles. And doing my own thing, weather dependent, mood dependent. And so, yeah, I think it worked when I stepped away from pharmacy. And that's when we kind of got into a good groove of how we wanted to raise our children on the ranch.
Yeah, fantastic. And you mentioned earlier that you're not working all of the land with your cattle operation. So is there another side business that you have as part of your operation?
No, we just lease out a lot of our farmland to local farmers. Unfortunately, a lot of our eggs are in the, cattle basket. So we have, like I said, a couple different things we do on the ranch. And then just what I do online is kind of, where my husband and I spend our time.
Yeah, fantastic. And for those who are interested, that we've piqued their interest for what you do online, can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that was all accidental. When I moved to Nebraska, I didn't have an opportunity to take a pharmacy job right away. And so instead of just kicking back and relaxing like a normal human would, I decided to find something to fill my time. And so I ended up starting a direct-to-consumer beef business with one of my friends. And so we knew right away that if we were going to, sell beef online, we were going to have a community built around that. If you're going to get strangers to buy from you, they need to know you and trust you. And so right away, we started using social media to market our beef business. And I did that for 2 years. And that is kind of what I say initially, honestly, helped me saw Instagram and social media for what it really is, which is a marketing tool and a connection tool. And so I ended up doing the direct-to-consumer beef business for 2 years and then stepping away from that to kind of pursue more of like a personal brand and kind of what I do now, which is share more about our family. And I have the podcast now. And so it was really, accidental. I really never intended to share our family in the way I do. I always thought I would just, sell beef. But there was, this tipping point, I guess. I remember we were at a conference and YouTube was there speaking, and there was someone from the back end who had analyzed analytics. That was their job for YouTube. And they said, I'll never forget, they said on stage that they had never seen a trend skyrocket in views the way that farming was online. And I just thought, gosh, there's something there. There's something about sharing agriculture online that I think we should really take advantage at this time in our lives right now. And so that was the decision to step away from the beef business and share online. So I guess my husband has a conference in Omaha, Nebraska to thank for where we are now. Because I don't know if I would have made that shift if we, hadn't attended that conference and I hadn't been just, I guess, so captivated by what YouTube was saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I really enjoy listening to Discover Ag. And so can you tell me a little bit more about the podcast and the avenue that you took with YouTube as well?
Yeah, so that was another accidental start, the podcast. I'm a pretty strong believer in changing direction in your life based off of kind of what's going on. And so I pivot a lot and I make changes based off I guess what I'm seeing and feeling. And so I had made friends with my co-host. I run the podcast with another gal. She's a dairy farmer from New Mexico. And we had been friends for quite some time online. We were just both sharing as females in agriculture. And I guess you make fast friends kind of when you're, that much aligned. And so we had known each other for quite a while, but through a couple different events that I feel like just happened at the right time for each of us. We ended up coming together to start one business and then also our podcast. And so, if you had asked me 2 years ago, a year ago, if I would be podcasting, I would have said, no way. I had always loved the podcasting space. I've consumed them forever, but I just didn't know what I would talk about. I just never really envisioned that for me. But the moment we started the podcast, I knew right away that this was going to be for me. I'm just really in love with this way we can communicate in this long form conversations, and the way you can, have detailed conversations in a space right now online that I feel like everything is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. I feel like it's such a breath of fresh air to have real conversations. And so I'm very happy that we ended up starting the podcast. It's every Thursday, and what we do is we cover 3 trending headlines in the ag and food space. And so what kind of happened is we just got tired of seeing, New York Times write about something that was going in agriculture and not interview farmers, or not be written from the perspective of a farmer, and, Wall Street Journal, or, food influencers. I mean, whoever it is, there's so many people out there who are sharing about food and ag, but really haven't stepped foot on a farm or ranch, and haven't been really exposed to production agriculture. And so we just thought, why not be the voice that, talks about those headlines, that does bring it from a farmer's perspective. And so we keep a, female millennial twist to it. So we keep it pretty entertaining, but also informative. And I feel like it's really kind of the meld of my 2 favorite worlds, this, pop culture headline, trending news, things that are taking place, but, kind of the facts and the realities of agriculture, and getting it out there with like a perspective from someone who's living it every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really love listening to that side of it as well. It is absolutely refreshing. So thank you for stepping into that space. If there was a piece of, advice or knowledge that you could give to someone moving to the farm or to their ranch for the first time, what would that look like?
Yeah, I think the longer you are in production agriculture, the more you realize that you signed up for a job and a lifestyle that has very little control. And I think the sooner you embrace that and learn to have fluidity, kind of just roll with the punches, I guess, essentially, for lack of better words, I think the easier the lifestyle is. And I think once you stop fighting that need for control, you actually kind of settle into a space of, I don't know, just warmth, I guess, with farming and ranching. I think you learn to appreciate the beauty of it, and what it really has to offer you. But I think you can't do that when you're struggling trying to control. You'll never be able to control the weather. You'll never be able to control the markets. You'll never be able to control so many different facets of your day-to-day job. And so I think that energy that you spend sometimes trying to exert control could better serve just with appreciation for the lifestyle. I just think you start to have a different relationship with it, a healthier one, when you learn, that we're not in control, and we just kind of do the best we can every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. And was that some similar advice to what you were given when you first moved on farm? Or do you remember, a gem, a piece of knowledge that someone gave you that you still refer to?
I got no advice when I moved back to the ranch. I wish I'd gotten advice. I do remember, though, early on when I had met my husband, we had a pretty serious conversation right away about what it meant essentially for me to marry agriculture again. And I know those can be like hard conversations to have at the beginning of relationships, serious things like that. But I just knew, I know what it takes to run ag. I know what it takes to be devoted, be married to the ranch, essentially. And so I had a lot of hard conversations with Luke right away about what travel looked like, if he wanted to do travel, what different seasons looked like. And I think I did a good job of communicating to him my desires moving forward, of how I wanted to spend our time, and what I wanted, I guess, a relationship with me on the ranch to look like. And I think that really served us well, having those conversations from the get-go, instead of waiting for them after you're married and on the ranch and then saying, but I don't want to, I want to travel in the summer, or I don't want to, do this or whatever it is, have those right away, because there are things with our lifestyle that, unfortunately you can't change, and so if you guys want to work around them or have something different, there's going to need to be communication around that. And the sooner the better, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Natalie, that comes to the end of my official questions for today's podcast. Was there anything else that you wanted to share with the rural mum community about moving to the farm or back to the farm for the first time that you think would be helpful for them?
Yeah, I think with our society right now and having social media, it really is a gift. You can be pretty isolated depending where you live. I have friends who I don't even know how, far away their closest neighbor is. And I think that generation of women before us probably really struggled with isolation in a way that we don't have to, because we can be so connected online. And so I think that anyone who is very remote, or anyone who does maybe struggle being back on an operation, or anyone who's maybe a first time, farm wife or ranch wife, I would find that community online of women, because I guarantee you there is another woman out there like you that is having the same thoughts, feelings, concerns, as you, and you don't have to go through it all alone. And then you also, it's fun to have someone to celebrate with too, and share the goods, as well, because not everyone understands their lifestyle. And so I really encourage, any woman on the ranch or farm to kind of find a community, whether that's in person or online.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important. Thank you so much for coming on today and chatting with us. If you've married a farmer, now what? So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me here on the farm with Natalie. I hope you've taken away some tips, tricks, hacks, all from our story and interview today about her background, raising cattle, their beef operation, and I hope you check out their podcast, Discover Ag. We are now taking nominations for season 5 interviewees. So if there is a rural woman out there who you would like to hear from, who has married a farmer and has information, tips, tricks, and hacks to share about moving to the farm for the first time, please go to our website and nominate them. The link will be in the description below. And we are also opening up sponsorship places for the podcast as well as the YouTube channel, also for season 5. We love supporting small businesses and large businesses. If you have a business that you feel would be suitable for our podcast, YouTube channel, and our community that we're growing here at the Rural Mum, please reach out and also nominate yourself over on our website. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next episode.